The boy never expected that in this world where everyone had a profession, he was the only exception, but he possessed a unique ability to mimic others' skills with even greater power. Although he had no professional status, his talent far exceeded professional limitations. Skills that others mastered, he could learn, and even skills others couldn't learn, he could master too. What happened recently caught him completely off guard. Normally, people receive their profession at 10 years old, but although the test showed he had no profession, his heart remained calm. He continued practicing swordsmanship as usual. Since his mother was a famous swordsman, and he had trained with her since childhood, he had already fallen in love with the sword. Therefore, even without a profession, he believed that hard training could still make him stronger, but practicing alone had its limitations. His mother was too powerful, so he couldn't learn anything from her. So he turned his attention to peers with swordsman professions, wanting to understand the true strength of professionals. According to what he knew, the entry-level skill for swordsmen was basic swordsmanship. Even if someone knew nothing about swords before, just having this skill would allow them to wield a sword freely. After observing for a while, his hands itched to try, so he proposed sparring with the two. They originally didn't want to bully the professionless Jake, but seeing his determination, they decided to show off a little. They weren't worried about hurting Jake because everyone was born with protective abilities. This was another blessing from the goddess, separate from the profession system. Although Jake had no profession, his protective ability still existed. This ability had defensive effects and could protect the body to some extent. The battle began quickly. Tommy thought he could easily defeat Jake, but his attacks were effortlessly deflected. This wasn't luck, but Jake truly had the corresponding strength. Since he had practiced with his mother since childhood, dealing with peers who had just gained professions was no problem at all. Tommy realized he couldn't win alone and called his companion to join the fight. Although somewhat dishonorable, 1 against 2 was more challenging for Jake. What disappointed him was that although his opponents had sword skills, their awareness and abilities were insufficient. When he approached, they showed no reaction. After taking down one person, Tommy tried to counterattack but nearly tripped due to unsteady footing. Jake seized the opportunity and achieved a double victory. The two were unwilling to accept defeat and wanted another round. At this moment, a red-haired youth stepped forward. He scolded the two for being too incompetent, saying there were no do-overs on the battlefield. Just as the two were about to retort, one of them recognized the red-haired youth. It turned out his father was the village defense team captain, a swordsman of considerable skill. But Ryan wasn't there to help Jake. He was also targeting Jake. His reason was to defend his father's honor. His father was strong, but in the villagers' minds, Jake's mother was the #1 swordsman. Therefore, he wanted to prove his father's strength through sparring with Jake. After all, talent is inherited, and this concerned his mother's reputation, so Jake accepted the challenge. He was just curious to see the level of a real swordsman. The battle resumed. Unlike the previous two, Ryan's strength was obviously superior. He was 1 year older than Jake, meaning he had been a swordsman for a year. More importantly, he had mastered an intermediate skill that usually took 3 years to learn. Although he wasn't clear about the specific content of this skill, based on Ryan's current display of strength, Jake was confident he could win. Just when he discovered Ryan's weakness, Ryan suddenly executed a double slash. This was Ryan's ultimate skill, but he didn't expect Jake to block one of the strikes. Double slash, as the name suggests, works on the principle of creating 2 attack effects with 1 sword swing. Since Jake didn't understand the details, he only defended against 1 of the 2 attacks. But as mentioned before, there are no do-overs on the battlefield. Jake lost this duel, but this didn't